Now, what if you wanted to do a comic strip? You've probably seen that, the comic strip that you see in the local paper. Well, that requires a little bit more than just learning to cartoon. It requires thinking of a clever punchline, a storyline, and you have to be able to show these cartoon characters with different expressions or movements. So let's just do a little bit right now just to give you the basic idea. And we're going to work on what's called a 4-panel strip. Now, most comic strips are panels, and they either have 2 panels, that means 2 separate windows that jut up against each other, or 3 or 4. And the basic one is a 4-panel strip. I'm not going to worry about getting straight lines. I just want you to see what it would be like to do a 4-panel strip. So across a piece of paper into 4 windows. In order for you to see mine, I have to do it on 2 separate pieces of paper, so I can work larger so you can see it. So there's our first of our 2 windows. And here's our 4-panel strip. So let's just say for this comic strip, I'm going to use animal characters, a cat and a mouse. So the first thing I want to do is, for the audience, you have to identify the characters in the first panel. So I know that I want the mouse to be smaller than the cat. They're not going to be the same size. A mouse is smaller, so I'm going to show them in their relative scale. And I'm going to give them human characteristics, which means they're going to be upright instead of those animals really are on all 4s. Both a cat and a mouse travel on all 4s. But what makes them funny is they are more human. So to the left, I'm going to do the cat. And so I'm going to give him kind of almost a diamond-shaped head with kind of narrow ears and cartoon eyes, a little triangle nose, whiskers, that's what makes him a cat, and he's going to be upright. Right? Like a human. He'll be upright. And I'll give him kind of mitten hands rather than paws. And his long tail kind of is behind him. So I have my cartoon cat to the left. And I want my cartoon mouse. I'm going to exaggerate the fact that he has a pointy nose by this long triangle and very large ears. And little tiny eyes, little dot for the end of his nose, whiskers. And he is kind of a thin little mouse, and he has just like stick legs and stick arms. I'm going to wait on the other arm because I don't know what's going to happen in this panel. With cartoon characters, how their bodies are positioned tells a lot about what's going on in that scene or the expression. So I think I'm going to have the cat say something first to the mouse, and the mouse responding. Now, when you're making a panel comic strip, you want to place the text of what someone says in the proper order. So since the cat is saying something first, I want the audience to know that they're going to read his lines first, which means I'm going to put it at the top of the panel. And then the mouse's response will be underneath, and that will tell the reader they have to read that second. Now, young cartoonists often make the mistake of drawing in the speech bubble first, and then they try to squeeze what the character's saying in there. Don't do that. Write it out first, then put the speech bubble around it. Now, I know that I want the mouse to be second, so I'm going to wait, and I think I'm going to have the cat say, "Hey, Midas," we'll call the mouse Midas, "Hey, Midas, do you know who took my pizza?" So I'm just going to write that here. Now, I'm just going to use my own printing, making sure it's nice and clear. I want my audience to be able to read it. "Hey, Midas, do you know who took my pizza?" Now, once I have that written out, then I will draw the speech bubble around it, which means I'm encasing it in an oval, and I show who's speaking by having a pointed line point to the character who is speaking. So that tells everyone the cat is saying this. Now the mouse is going to respond, so I know I can put it underneath. The order should always be whoever's speaking first is at the top, or to the left. Our character's to the left, the first character's to the left. I want Midas to say, "Why are you asking me?" So he is going to have his hands up like this. So that tells me kind of what body motion I have to have in there. So I'll put his stick arms up like this, like, "Why are you asking me?" So the expressiveness of the cartoon character helps a lot with the punchline or the storyline. So you can see our mouse is like this. And I'll have, "Why are you asking me?" And now I'll encase that in a speech bubble with the arrow pointing, the pointy part of the speech bubble pointing towards Midas's mouth. So now what you've already told your audience is this character is speaking first because the text is at the top and the arrow points to him, and this character is speaking next. Now planning is really important when you're doing a comic strip. You have to know whether or not you're going to show close-ups where the expressiveness of the character is really important, or you're showing action where you have to show full figure and in motion of some kind. So I'm planning out my strip. I'm thinking ahead of time as I'm doing it. So for this next panel, I already have set up a situation. The cat is missing his pizza. He's asking the mouse where it could be. The mouse is saying, "Why are you asking me?" For the next panel, panel 2, I still want to show the same two characters, but I'm going to show them in close-up. So you're not going to see their bodies because what they're doing with their bodies is really not important for this next panel. What they're saying is more important. I'm going to keep them in the same position. So I'm just going to work a little larger. So I'm going to take this kind of triangular face, or diamond-shaped face, really, of the cat, and his buddy Midas the mouse, with his exaggerated ears and his long pointy nose. But I need to leave room for what they're going to say. You can't fill up the frame entirely. And so this time, Midas is going to speak first, the mouse, but he's on the right. So how will I let people know that this character is speaking first? Well, again, it goes to placement of the speech bubble. So he just finished here. "Why are you asking me?" So now he's going to say, "You know I'm allergic to cheese." Okay. So I have to put my words up top, even though he's way over here. I'm going to encase that speech and have a long point down to Midas, who's speaking. But by placing it at the top of the frame, I'm letting the audience know this is what they should read first, even though he's on the right. And then I'll put what the cat says underneath it. Okay? So he's going to say, "But you're a mouse." "You can't be allergic to cheese." Then I come around that speech bubble and point it to the cat. So placement of where you put the speech bubbles is very important because that helps guide what the reader is going to do, even if your characters don't change their positions. And since what they were saying was more important, I just kept the focus on a close-up. So here we are, full body, then we move to close-up. Well, for the third panel, the expression on Midas's face is really important. So now we're doing even closer, and we're not going to show our cat character at all. We're just going to have Midas's face. So let's get him in there. He's got that exaggerated nose. those big ears. But instead of having his beady eyes open, he's making an expression where I want his eyelids closed. So I'm doing 2 small, shallow U's as his closed eyelids. And he is touching his chest, gesturing to himself as if he's very important. And so I want to make sure I have room to show that. So I have one of his very long, spindly hands kind of coming up here, and his long fingers, like this, are touching his chest. So because that's what I want to focus on, kind of the expression that's happening, that's why it's in such close-up. His closed eyes, touching his chest with his long, I don't know, I guess you'd call them paws. And he says, okay, maybe not allergic. Let's just say I have sophisticated taste. Okay, so he's bragging about himself, that the cheese on a pizza is just too plain for him. Okay, so it's only him speaking. So I have a choice. I can either do a speech bubble or just put the text at the top. He's the only one in the frame, so it's him speaking no matter what. Okay, so now I'm going to write that out. He says, okay, maybe not allergic. Let's just say I have more sophisticated taste. Now this is where your printing is really important, friends. A comic strip isn't funny if your readers can't read it. So if you're going to do comic strips in panels like this, you have to make sure your printing is nice and neat. Don't squash everything in. Make sure it's very clear. Okay, maybe not allergic. Let's just say I have more sophisticated tastes. So I can either leave it like that, or I can put a speech bubble around it, but it's just Midas in the frame. He's the one who's talking. So now I want to go back to showing the whole body and using body language where the whole body expresses, not just the face, but the whole body, what's happening. So now I want to show that the cat is kind of frustrated, right? Because he doesn't really believe that Midas didn't do something with his pizza. So we have the opening frame where we see the body. We're going to go back to that, but we're going to have the mouse heading in one direction and the cat heading in the other. So it's the same character, but their bodies are going to be turned. So on this last panel, I'm going to still do our mouse here, but I want to show him leaving in anger. So when you want to show movement like that, where someone has real passion or drive, or they're really driven, determined, you slant their body a little bit. So I'm going to show the cat with his kind of diamond-shaped head, but his body's going to be slanted away because he's angry, right? And his arms are going to be straight down because he's frustrated, balled up in a fist. And he's walking away. So I'm going to show one leg in front of the other. His body leaning. He's not very happy. He's looking back at his friend. And his eyes are going to be a little different because he doesn't really believe what Midas's story is. So he still has kind of the cartoon eyes, but he has kind of a line going across like a lowered brow because he's not too pleased with his friend the mouse. He's looking back in frustration. And Midas thinks he got away with it. So now his point is directed the other way, and his big ears, and he's just kind of happy, and he's going to head off, and so his arms are kind of swinging because he's kind of pleased with himself. We see his legs apart because he's walking away. So one leg is forward and one leg is back, as if he's walking away. Now what we're going to do in this panel, what I want you to understand is there's a difference between a speech bubble and a thought bubble. because some characters in cartoons think something, but they don't say it out loud. So what we just left with was Midas the mouse saying, okay, maybe not allergic, let's just say I have more sophisticated taste. So then what happens is Midas is walking away and the cat is now thinking. He's not saying. So when you have something that a character is thinking, it's a thought bubble. And rather than making it a regular oval with a single line, you make it almost like a puffy cloud. And so he's saying sophisticated and sneaky. So sophisticated. So it's just like you would with your speech bubble. You write it out first. Sophisticated and sneaky. But he's not saying it, he's thinking it. So I'm going to encase it in what looks like a cloud. So it's like puffy bumps, like this. And to show that this character is thinking it, you make almost like bubbles heading towards that character. And that is called a thought bubble. So it's different than a speech bubble. So no one's speaking in our last panel. The mouse is just walking away. And we can tell by body language that the cat's walking away, but he doesn't trust Midas, and he's thinking something. So already, as we've worked on our little 4-panel comic, we've talked about the importance of having a storyline with some type of punchline or action that's taking place, that you have to have careful planning. You want to set up and develop your characters so your reader knows who's involved within the first panel, that you can do close-ups if you're just caring about what they're saying, really close up if their facial expressions are important to advance the story, and the difference between a speech bubble and a thought bubble. I bet you can do a lot of different cartooning, creating characters, either human characters or animal characters. They're always fun. And the fun part is, friends, you can have recurring characters and make comic strips over and over and over again. You know, I know my kids used to spend a lot of time making up comic strips. Look at some of your favorites in the local paper. Watch some cartoons perhaps on TV with your parents' permission to get an idea of drawing styles and how different artists, different cartoon artists, convey those styles, what kind of lines they use and shapes they use. Cartooning can be a lot of fun. And one of the ways that you want to finish off to really make this look professional is to use a black marker. So after you've worked with your pencil and you've decided that the lines that you have are the ones that you want, then you do what's called cleanup. And so if I were to go back to my giraffe, I would use an eraser to get rid of all the pencil lines that I don't want and I don't want to see. And the way the cartoon really looks finished is to take a nice bullet tip black marker and to actually make your lines now in black marker for that cartooning effect, so that you really show it as a finished product. And you would do the whole thing in your black marker. Now once you get really practiced at cartooning, you can actually go right to marker and skip the pencil altogether. And that's when you really feel confident in the types of shapes and characters you're creating. I love cartooning. I like spending time thinking up new shapes, new characters, even if it's just a toaster. But you spend some time finding everything you can around the house and make it into a cartoon. And I bet you'll have a lot of fun. I'll see you next time for another See the Light art project.